All right, everyone. Welcome back to Intermediate Python. This is now week 4. We're like more than halfway through. Today, we're going to go over list methods, like last time, how we went over string methods. Lists also have methods to them. We're also going to go over tuples, for loops, and we're going to do some practice problems. So what are lists? As you might know, lists are a collection of items such as strings and integers, or even other lists. Lists can be ordered and can be modified. For example, we have list 1 here, has 2 elements, string 1 and string 2. Lists always have square brackets, take note of that. And list 2, we have 3 integers. 3, we have a combination of strings and integers. Just like strings, lists also have indexes. Each index refers to the position of an item within a list. List indexes are formatted in the same way as string indexes, as you may remember from last time. Just going back to the previous slide. So we have list 1 here, right? Index 0 will be string 1, index 1 will be string 2. It's basically the same as how a string index functions. Hopefully you remember what we went through last time, the string indexes. Practice 1, we have a list here, list 1, with all these elements. What the length of list 1 be? And what index would u be at? And what element of the list is at index -1? This is kind of like a review of last time as well. We'll just take a few minutes to work on this. As you may remember, len refers to the length, the object. Here we have 5 objects in this list, so the length would be 5. U is the second element of the list. So as you might remember, indexes start from 0. So since U is the letter U is the second element of the list, it will be at index 1. Index -1 will be the last element of the list, which will be the letter Y. Next, we have some list methods. So last week we went over string methods, and lists also have methods. So first we have the append method. Start append element. Elements refer to the items in the list, and this method adds an element at the end of the list. So as you can see, we have list 1, and when you use append on list 1, let's say append 9, for example, 9 gets added to the end of the list. So now we have this new list right here. Next, we have to copy. It creates an exact replica of the list, a shallow copy. Here, once again, we have list 1, and we have list 2. List 2 equals list 1 dot copy. So this means that list 2 is a copy of list 1. And when we print list 2, we get the exact same result that we will get if we use print on list 1. Next, we have clear. Clear removes all items from a list. Once again, we have list 1. When you use clear on list 1, we have an empty list, as shown by these empty square brackets. Then we have the count method. The count method returns the number of times an element appears in the list. Here we have list 1, and x equals list1 dot count 1. So x is equal to the number of times the number 1 appears in this list. And when we print x, we get 2 because 1 appears 2 times in this list. Next, we have the index. This returns the index of the first instance of an element. So it basically tells you where the first appearance of an object in a list is. X equals list1 dot index 4. So it tells you the index which 4 appears in this list, which is 2. Next, we have insert. Insert has two parameters. If insert an object before the specified index, list1.insert parameters 2 and random object. This will insert the string random object before index 2. So now it takes the position of index 2. As you can see here, we have this new list with random object at index 2. Next, we have the pop method. Pop removes the last item from the list and stores it into a variable if it's assigned to one. If x equals list1.pop, so x is assigned to the item that was popped. Pop list1, the last element, which is 5, will get removed and it will be assigned to x. As you can see here, 5 was popped and the new list becomes 3, 1, 4, and 1. Next, we have remove. It removes the element specified in the parameters. There are multiple, we'll just remove the first appearance of the element. Remove 1 from list 1, then it will remove the first appearance of 1 in list 1. As you can see here, it used to be the list used to be 3, 1, 4, 1, 5. Now it's just 3, 4, 1, 5.
Is pop just removed, but also it puts into a variable?
Oh, that's the variable part is reserved for pop only.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
popping removes the thing from the list, right?
yeah.
Okay, cool.
But only the last object from the list. No matter what you put in the parameters, it only removes the last object from the list. Remove is for like removing specific objects in specific indexes. And we have reverse, which is pretty self-explanatory. It reverses the order of the elements in the list. If we reverse list 1, we have, well, the reverse list. Next, we have sort. This is very useful. You do a lot of work sometimes. And it sorts the list in ascending order. Now, if the list doesn't like only contain integers, if it like contains letters, then it also applies to letters. It will sort the letters based on ascending alphabetical order. So here we have two lists. One is made of integers only. One is made of strings, letters. If we sort list 1, we will get the list in increasing order. If we sort list 2, we'll also get the list in increasing order.
Can you sort them in descending order?
Descending order, there's not really a method for descending order, but what you can do is you can sort the list first and then reverse it, which is basically the same. Next, we have min. So it stands for minimum and returns the smallest value in the list. Also applies to letters. And then we have max. Maximum returns the largest value in the list. Once again, also applies to letters. Here we have practice number 2. I will post all the list methods that we went over in the chat, so like you can use them. One thing, min and max are more like functions rather than like your ordinary methods. You see here, you put them like before the list.
Hey, can you copy and paste the list into chat too?
Yeah. All right, so I will move on. All right. So in the future, it would be a good idea. For example, if you want to find the smallest and largest values, it's good to assign them to a variable, such as simple min1 equals minimum list1. So to keep your code like shorter, so that you don't get like confused in the middle of coding. For the first one, just use min and max. And for the second one, yeah, just use count. And then third one, use the remove method. And fourth one, you can either use insert or append, but it's easier to use append because append is literally it just adds something to the end of the list. So there's you can use insert, but it's just a lot easier to use append. Alright, looks like you are very pretty much familiar with this. Here we have another shorter practice using some of the skills we learned from the previous weeks. Write a function such as it takes a list as a parameter, and when using the function, it gives the reversed version of the same list and the sorted version of the same list. Also, for consistency, you may want to put either only strings or only integers in the same list, or the reverse and sort methods are going to have a bit of a problem. Next, we have tuples. So tuples are similar to lists, but they use these normal parentheses instead of the square brackets. And one thing that's very significant is that they cannot be modified. Basically, lists, for example, you can use append, insert, remove, but for tuples, you can't do any of that, and their values remain locked. So here we have a tuple. Note that has the normal parentheses, the round parentheses, and yeah, as I mentioned, most of the list methods will not work on a tuple because they are meant for modifying lists, but since tuples cannot be modified, they don't work on it. Except for index and count, which does work. Also use len on the tuple. So that's pretty much it for tuples. Just remember that it's basically it's like a list, but cannot be edited or modified. Next, we have for loops. For loops, a loop basically runs a code over a sequence, and for loops specifically uses the keywords for and in. This ties back to lists, which we were talking about earlier. Here we have list 3, and then we have for loop for num and list 3 print num. Basically, what this does is says, so here we have list 3, and so basically what this for loop says is that says for each object num, num, you can really name it anything you want. It doesn't have to be num, it's supposed to represent like the each object part. Just name it whatever you want. For each object in list 3, do something. And here we have a print function. So basically, it will print out all the objects in list 3 by order, one at a time. As you can see here, the print function is executed multiple times because it's in a loop. Here we have another example, a for loop that also uses list methods. List 1 and list 2, here we have a for loop. For I in list 1, again, I represents like the each object part in list 1. List 2 will append I. So list 2 will append each object from list 1. Now if we print list 2, we have this. From list 1 are now appended into list 2. Your turn to do the practice problem. Basically, the example that we just went over. So we have list 1 and list 2. Write a for loop so that for each element in list 2, list 1 appends that element. For blah and blah, do something. The main keywords are for and in, which For signifies a for loop, and in represents like for each object in one. Right. We have list 1 and list 2, and we use a for loop to append each element in list 1 in each iteration, which means each time the code is executed in a loop. Loops continued. You can also use the range function to repeat the code a specific number of times. So as an increment of 1 by default, and as you can see here, we have the usage of a range function. So now instead of we have for blah and range something. So if you simpler words, it's just this for loop was 5 in range function. It executes the code 5 times because range is 5. In range 5, print I. So I would start at 0 by default because it's a default starting point in the for loop iteration. As you can see here, the code is repeated 5 times, does start at 0 and go all the way up to 4. We have another practice problem. Use a for loop with a range function to print a variable x, which you can assign to any string or integer, for example, a total of n times. Basically, what this problem asks you is, for example, if x is like assigned to a string, let's say, how would you print the string a total of, let's say, 100 times? All right, so to do this, you can just assign x to you can just assign x to use a for loop range function, and range inside the range function's parentheses will be how many times you want the code to repeat, and then you have the print function, and when you run it, the print function will run a total of however many times you specified in the range function. All right, everyone, if you don't have any more questions, you can feel free to head out. Otherwise, have a good weekend, everyone.